the work of an Iowa-based organization, Bailing Out Benji, kind of helped spark this investigation. Can you tell me about that?
That resolution filed in King County Superior Court requires the company to pay the state $3.75 million with interest.
Bailing Out Benji regularly looks through these records of dogs' movement from state to state.
Bailing Out Benji
played a key part in unraveling a nationwide puppy scheme.
Bailing Out Benji,
an organization that's been working across the country to stop the pipeline of puppy mill breeders.
Bailing Out Benji.
I will use my voice because they don't have one, and I will keep doing it until there are no more puppy mill dogs.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Truth, Lies, and Puppy Mills, Bailing Out Benji's podcast. I'm Kristen. With me today, as always, is Mindy. And we have kind of a special episode for you this week. So what we're doing this week is we are playing for you a webinar that was recorded last fall. So last fall, you and Alexis had the opportunity to do this webinar talking to people about the field research that you had started to do and the visits that you had made to some facilities. There's so much good material in that, and as we launch into this field research series, that seemed like a really great place to start by just sharing some of the content of that webinar with people. So before we start that, what can you tell us about this webinar? How did this come to be? Why did you do it? What led you to make this presentation?
Yeah, so Spring Point, who is one of our funders, we're so lucky to get grants from them. They had already asked me earlier that year to do some kind of webinar about our research on puppy mills for just their listeners. It's something, they do a listening series once a month. I believe it's once a month. And they invite experts in their field to just come in and talk. And so they had already kind of like put a bookmark for me. They had told me to give this presentation at a later date. And Chaitana happened to be at the same canine care conference that Alexis and I were at. And so as Alexis and I were leaving, I walked over to Chaitana's table and I just said, hey, this is what I want to do my PowerPoint on. And she was like, are you sure? Because we kind of all anticipated some negative feedback when Alexis and I decided to start talking about this. We didn't know what to expect for sure, but there was that moment of pause where it was like, do we really want to go public with what we saw and what we felt and what we learned? So that's kind of how it came about. It was something that was already pre-planned, but after being in Indiana and seeing what we saw and meeting the people that we met, I felt like it was our responsibility to bring this to the forefront in a way that hadn't been before.
So what we are going to be listening to today is actually the second time you recorded this webinar. So you recorded it once, there were some issues, and so, because it was done on Zoom.
Well, so the webinar was live.
Right.
And so
on Zoom,
and it was very overwhelming. We've talked about how when Alexis and I had hopped on to give this webinar, anyone who's been on Zoom, you know that it's everyone's faces when you're in the waiting room or when you're waiting for the speaker to start. And so we kind of started seeing really big names. And then you could see, this person is joined and this person is joined. And we started to feel that gravity of the situation because USDA inspectors were popping on and state inspectors were popping on. We saw people from national animal welfare organizations. We saw people from the most notorious pet stores and the most notorious brokers across the country. So it was so overwhelming realizing how many people were listening to our words in that moment. But yes, the original one that we had done live, for whatever reason, the recording got corrupted. And so we had to re-record it. And that's what everyone will be watching today.
Okay, so hopefully the second time around a few less jitters, because now I can't even imagine just I'm just going to do this presentation and then you start to see all of these this attendance building and like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
But then doing it a second time allowed you to take some of the questions that were asked during the live webinar and incorporate them into your presentation the second time around, which is actually really neat. That's a good benefit of having to record it a second time. So that's kind of what we're going to hear here is your original presentation. If you're watching on YouTube, there are slides that you'll see. If you're listening, you don't get to see that content, but we will put a link to it. So if you kind of hear referencing, here's what's on the screen, that's what it's about. And then those questions kind of sprinkled in as well. So anything else you want to say before we launch into the webinar?
No, I'm really excited for people for anyone who hasn't heard the webinar, I'm excited for them to hear what our mindset was like at that time. And we visited so many kennels since, so everything has kind of evolved. And yeah, I'm excited to have this out there. I'm nervous, but I'm excited. So.
All right, well, let's roll it.
One thing that I would add is when we were talking about this live, we had asked people to drop some comments in the chat. What does a puppy mill mean to you? What is your definition of a puppy mill? And when you're looking at these photos, these are 100% facilities Alexis and I would say are puppy mills. The dogs are caged. It doesn't appear as though they have any access to grass or enrichment. You see that the wires are rusted, that they're standing on hard wire. So these photos are ones that Alexis and I look at all the time. We constantly, through our FOIA requests, we're seeing these horrific examples of the breeding industry. And so when we asked the community to type in the chat, what do you think a puppy mill is? What is that, what do these images conjure for you? People mentioned profit without regard to the well-being of the adult dogs. So yeah, I would look at this and say, none of this looks like the dogs are being well cared for as companion animals. Someone else wrote, breeding for volume and profit without the investment in the medical, behavioral, or emotional health of adults and puppies. And again, that's something I would agree with by looking at these photos. Others said cruelty, suffering, exploitation. All of those are very, very true. And that is what the public is seeing, right? These images that we FOIA, other organizations FOIA, and we put them out into the public constantly. We are saying this is what puppy mills are, but we're never really talking deeply on the other side of it. What are non-puppy mill commercial dog breeding facilities look like? And unfortunately, before June, we really didn't have much ability to go into these facilities. Alexis and I have both been a part of rescues where we've gone to USDA kennels that were very cruel and inhumane, who had a lot of violations that we were able to take small amounts of dogs from. And Alexis, I don't know if you want to talk about your experience, how that felt going to Southern Iowa and just pulling dogs from the worst puppy mill in the country.
Yeah, it was disheartening a little bit. One dog specifically sticks out because she spun in circles on the hour drive back. Like it was not typical behavior of a companion animal. You could tell that they were stressed, that they weren't taken care of. There were medical things that were of concern. So it was disheartening to see, and just kind of confirms some of the bad side of what we see. If like this is really happening, companion animals aren't really being taken care of in some of these facilities, and it was very sad to see animals not act like a regular dog would in your household.
Yeah, and they had long nails. They were missing fur. It was all of the things you think of when you've rescued a puppy mill dog, right? And so that is what we kind of were going into when we first heard from Dr. Croney. And so I just want to throw this out there. It wasn't like I just called her up and said, hey, show me your kennels. This was a 2-year process where I went to, when Alexis joined me, an online forum that Dr. Croney and the Canine Welfare Group was hosting for canine welfare for the breeders. And they were learning from scientists, they were learning from geneticists, from veterinarians, they were learning from each other. And so that first year, we, and a bunch of organizations, we all attended online. And after that weekend, I emailed Dr. Croney and I just said, thank you so much for this. I had no idea what your program did, and I see a path forward. This is really exciting. And I said the same thing to my counterparts, my colleagues in the animal welfare space. I said, wow, this looks great. And it wasn't until 2 years later that I would actually get to experience it firsthand. It was a lot of conversations with Dr. Coney, phone calls and emails. We're friends now. We ask about each other's families. And I said that last week, and she was like, Mindy, you're going to get us crucified. But I think it's a really important part of this conversation. We are seeing people as humans, and we're connecting on a human level. None of these people are just data points. And up until June, we saw all of these as data points. We saw all of these as invisible people in our database that we could just kind of facts and figures and throw things out there for the public, but we didn't get to know these humans as humans. And so I just didn't want anyone to think that they could just call Dr. Crony up and think they can go visit these places, next week. It took a lot of trust building. And so anyway, how did these images make you feel? That's what we asked again last week. And so many people in the comments were like, this is so much better. Look at all that grass. Look at the enrichment. Someone commented on a future photo that we showed, LOL, jotting down ideas for my own backyard. And it just made me laugh because that's kind of what Alexis and I were seeing. And as we go through this, we'll talk about it more, but we were seeing things like, wow, the shelters might really like that type of technology. This play yard looks like a doggy daycare. How do we get more shelters and rescues to do things like this as well? How can we continue learning from each other? And so here's a cute little video that I pulled. To me, this just doesn't scream puppy mill. A few minutes ago, we were defining what everyone thinks a puppy mill is, and look at this. There's enrichment, there's socialization, there are all of these dogs playing and getting to know each other. And so this is just, I don't know, Alexis, so hopeful for us. Like when we saw these things, we knew that canine care existed, but we didn't really know. And so in June, Alexis and I found ourselves in the middle of Indiana, just the two of us. And we had a hotel mix-up, which was my fault and very funny. But the night before we were supposed to start our tour, we were told one of the local breeders wants to have everyone over for dinner. And so Alexis and I at first were like, okay, we're in this. We're here with open hearts. We're here with open minds, and we're going to trust that everything is going to go okay. And we weren't scared. We thought it was a little weird. Like, what are we going to talk about? None of us have anything in common, but we did it. And what we noticed was throughout the dinner, more laughter happened over the course of the night. We were sharing plates of food with their children and their family, and we were talking about our lives as humans and their lives as humans. We weren't even talking about our titles and our jobs. We were talking about people. And slowly throughout the night, you could just kind of feel all of the stress leave. Everyone kind of slowly started understanding neither person wants to cause harm to the other. And so it was really interesting for us because we saw conditions and technology in these facilities that we never dreamed possible. Alexis, do you want to talk a little bit about the first facility we went to?
Yeah. Well, I think the major thing of going on to the kennel was we did get to see like the play yards and stuff. So we would walk through the dogs and they would bark for a little bit, but they settled after a while. They like normalized us being there. So I think that was a major sign and something that taught in conversation they were very proud of, which I think is a great thing to be proud of because usually, I mean, I've volunteered in rescues. I've been to problematic facilities. And so seeing dogs that weren't stressed by us being in there, that were like, hey, okay, you're cool, that's fine. It was a great thing to see. And they would take treats from us, but then they'd like still kind of want to socially interact with us too. So I think that was something that was pretty amazing. Did you want to talk about the features that you liked? I think the thermometers on the wall.
Yeah, so this is something that before we were in the van on our way to the first facility, And Devon and Marietta, they are breeders who we didn't see their facility on the tour, but they traveled in because they really knew it was important to have a conversation with me and Alexis. And so they came to the forum early. But they were so proud of this right here and magnetic doors, which we'll talk about in a second. But it was so neat to see that every single kennel area that the mother dogs were in had a heating pad that could be controlled by a remote. And on this box, you could see exactly what temperature each heating pad was sitting at. So the puppies, as you can see in the photo on the right, the puppies can stay on that heating pad in that box, but the mama dog can hop out. She can go up the stairs. She can go outside to the play yard area. She has full reign to do everything she wants, but that puppy gets to stay in that nice, safe, secure area. And this one piece of technology has helped lower the canine morbidity rate so much. And this was something that we learned as we were, talking with these people, that a lot of the Amish facilities got into dog breeding the way we've told everybody. Puppy mills started, right? These big factory farms pushed out the small local farmer, and the local farmer had to figure out what to farm next. No education came with that. And so where that educational piece finally fit in was when the group of Amish breeders in Indiana went to Purdue and said, "We only hear what we're doing wrong. Can you show us how to do it right?" And that to me just it spoke volumes. This is something that was led by them and their community. And just as much as Alexis and I are nervous to try and bring this conversation into our community, so were they. They had to talk to their family members and their friends and their neighbors at the store and at church and basically say, the way we are doing it is wrong. Here is the better way. No one ever wants to tell their friends the way you're doing something is wrong. Maybe there's a better way. And so there was a lot of bravery there, and there's also a lot of competition, and it's really fun competition. But they all kind of work together to help build these facilities. And the minute one family is done building theirs, the other one is starting to build theirs, and they're like, haha, I'm going to do this differently, or I'm going to put this in, and it's going to be the upgraded version of your kennel already. And it's like a fun way for them to continue growing their business, their family business, but the dogs are benefiting. That's the one thing, with what Alexis was saying with the socialization, the dogs were self-soothing. They barked at us when we walked up, and then they ran and grabbed toys, ran and, played in the play yard. These dogs are not the typical puppy mill dogs that Alexis and I rescue or have rescued in the past. And so one of the questions that we had was how many adults and puppies can be on site in these types of facilities? And that's a really important question, right? Especially as an organization that has always looked at the number of adult breeding dogs. That is something that we've reported, a million times over since our founding. There's no cap in these types of facilities for the number of adult dogs or the number of puppies, but it all is very dependent on the level of care and attention they could provide to the animals. So on the next slide, I think it's the next slide. Yep. We went to Marty's kennel and he breeds mastiffs. And his kennel cannot have nearly the amount of dogs as a breeder with small dogs because the dogs in those kennels are larger and need more care. And I'm sure people are really sick of me telling this story, but Marty's kennel was probably the most eye-opening for me because I'm a large dog breed mom. I always foster and adopt large breed dogs. The bigger, the better. And walking into a facility knowing that they were going to have around 18 adult breeding mastiffs, I had no idea what they were going to be like. What was the temperament going to be like? That was something that I knew I could really vibe with and I could really see what was happening. And as you can see, this mastiff was happy and friendly. And as I'm trying to listen to Marty share his stories, this mastiff is dropping toys on me. He wants me to play fetch. Yes, this Amish bred dog in a USDA facility knew how to play fetch. He knew what toys are. And so when we're talking about the size of facility in this program, it doesn't equate humane or inhumane care. And that's something that we didn't realize until we saw it. There were facilities that did have 70 adult breeding dogs or around there. We didn't physically count them all, but never at any of the facilities we visited did we think, this is too many? Or could we even tell how many dogs there were? Because everyone was doing their own thing. No one was barking ferociously. No one was terrified at us. Everyone was kind of off in their own little space. Did you have anything to add about dog count, Alexis?
Yeah, I mean, I think the second Marty we saw was one of the bigger ones. He had a lot of dogs, but like that was by far my favorite facility, not just because of the mini poodle, but because she was so cute. She was coming up and laying in my lap. But just we went into the play yards, and he had talked about before we'd seen his kennel that like his sons helped with the socialization of the dogs, and like with that many dogs, I think that's always a concern. At least that's what I tell people when like they ask me about it, like having hundreds of dogs, like socialization is a concern. But like going into Marty's play yards with all of his tiny little dogs, like you could tell that they were socialized, that his boys did a wonderful job just loving on those dogs because they would come up to us even after all the treats were gone. They'd want to lay in our laps. They'd want to get pets. Like they sought attention and affection. Like they were just, I just thought it was amazing. And that's not something that, like, looking at the hard data or the hard numbers, that I never envisioned would be something that would happen. So that was definitely altering to see what I maybe on paper wouldn't have like thought would be okay, but like they were loved, they were taken care of. There were lots of people coming in to help with their socialization. So there's other aspects that we have to look at when looking at the data and not just the numbers.
Since you mentioned your little mama dog, do you want to talk about the intentional breeding and the rehoming plans that happen with the adults?
Yeah, yeah. I think that's always a concern too, because we're like, oh, well, there's no breeding cap on dogs, and like there's no plan in like puppy mills for them to leave and be dogs after. But something that was very amazing to see was that each of these facilities did have a plan for their dogs. They can breed them for up to 6 years, 6 years old, I think, and then or 6 litters, and then like it's done with the intention that they are going to be in homes. So they're also doing things throughout the breeding program to make sure that the dogs are ready to leave. Like we saw stairs in the kennels, that's getting them ready to go up and downstairs. They talk about how they also try to do like some leash training before they leave the breeding program. So it's like they're being intentional with these dogs, and they know that they're going to be companions one day. And so they're really treating that and fostering that type of environment so that they can be ready to go to homes after their breeding program. And that's just not what we see in the puppy mill industry. So it was just absolutely amazing to see that initiative and to know that they were caring so much about the dogs at their facility that they wanted them to have that end goal of like being in a home after they leave their kennel.
Well, and I think it was Tim's facility, which is where this little Pomeranian was, where he said that he would have vet students come to the property. And certain dogs, no matter what he did, were having a negative reaction to these students. And he didn't understand why until he realized it was the baseball caps and hoodies. That's not something their culture typically wears until he realized that was the problem. So he and his son started putting on ball caps and hoodies to try and make sure that the dogs were understanding that people wearing those clothes weren't scary and that they were also able to be trusted. So it was little things like that, those conversations I just found so powerful, right? And it made me feel so happy about their intentions with this. It's we all talk about profit over welfare. And every single facility we visited, not only could you see the welfare of the animals and the love that they put into their kennels, every single facility owner was like, Mindy and Alexis, what did you see? Is there something we could be doing better? Did you have any concerns? What were those concerns? Can we fix that? It wasn't us being there inspecting. We weren't inspectors. That wasn't our goal. We were just there to have conversations and get to know people, but they were really interested at their core with what's driving us. Why are we doing what we're doing? And how can they do things that make us less angry at them? And then in the chat as well, someone asked, are these puppy mill breeders seeing dogs as companion animals? And I wanted to ask it that way because these aren't puppy mill breeders. And I mentioned this on our last call. We have to separate the term puppy mill from commercial breeder. And I know that's yucky, that's icky, it's hard. Things are hard, especially when it's not black or white. But these facilities that we saw, the dogs that we saw, we would never call puppy mill dogs. We would never ever call any of these facilities puppy mills. And we probably saw 300 or so dogs that day or over the course of a day and a half. And not one dog did I think I need to save it. Not one dog did Alexis and I think that dog is suffering, that dog needs immediate care, that dog needs. Those dogs needed nothing. They didn't need anything from us. They needed us to observe what was happening and just be honest and truthful about what was going on. Trying to see. So, someone else asked in the chat, shelters and rescues are very full. So what do these breeders see as their role in this? And that's a very valid question. Shelters and rescues all over the country are just drowning in animals that need homes. Part of that, I want to kind of again separate the issue because it's not always, one for one. It's not because a puppy mill exists, a shelter is overpopulated. A lot of the shelter problems we see in these communities are community problems, right? What does the spay neuter programs look like in that community? Is it low cost? Are there microchip free clinics? Are there free vaccine clinics? What is the rescue community and the sheltering community doing in that in their communities, excuse me, to make it whole? Are there pet food pantries? How are we keeping families together? And so I did want to kind of separate that a little bit. But there are a lot of breeders, puppy mills, reputable breeders, a lot of facilities do often utilize rescues and shelters to rehome their animals. I believe that these canine care breeders are trying really hard to limit that because the puppies that they're breeding are healthier. They are really focused on genetic testing. Alexis and I, again, we saw that all weekend long at the forum. They had a lot of people talking about the importance of genetic screening, OFA tests, making sure that your puppy is as healthy as, or the parents are as healthy as they can be, so the puppies can be healthy, so you don't have consumers who are upset or angry at you. And so they're trying all of these different ways to make sure their puppies are staying in homes forever, while also looking at their intentional breeding program to see what's it going to take to rehome 50 dogs when they hit 5 years or 6 years. And so they're really trying to look internally to figure out what that looks like in the next few years. Someone else in the comments had said, it doesn't look like these facilities would be dumping their animals at shelters, and that's something I can agree with. Right now, they do use a few of the private rescues that they have grown trustworthy relationships with, but again, these dogs don't need rescued, right? They just need rehomed. And so, what these breeders have done to make sure the animals are ready for that forever home is the stairs that you see, the play yards, the toys. These dogs are being talked to, they're being pet. They're as ready for a home as they could possibly be coming out of a commercial breeding facility. We're not denying the fact that these are still commercially bred dogs, right? These are not dogs that are sharing our beds with us, but the adults finally have a pathway out, and that is not something that's ever happened in the past. Oh, trying to see what else. So another question that came in, are these dogs being transported by the same brokers that pick up from inhumane puppy mills? And that's a really valid question too. We were able to visit one brokering facility. Alexis, also yell at me if I'm just rambling and you want to shout out. But one of the brokering facilities we were really impressed by, because again, this is a part of the world that we've seen on paper. I've read hundreds of hundreds of pages of court cases talking about dog brokers and the brokering industry, but getting to see something like that firsthand was really, really cool and important for me and Alexis. But one of the things that we liked about this broker, and again, not all is the point we're trying to get across with this conversation. Not all Amish are cruel, not all breeders are cruel. And so that not all space is that uncomfortable space that we're living in right now. But this brokering facility isn't one that I had concerns about going into. Not only did we see firsthand that their veterinarians are helping to serve a veterinary desert that's in their community. Their veterinarians are there to help members of the community, whether they're breeders or just neighbors. If they have an emergency, this facility has vets when no one else in the community has access to that. Um, but they're also being very, very intentional with who they buy from. And so the brokering facility that we saw, they want to make sure the breeders they're buying from meet these standards, are canine care certified. Whether or not they're completely certified yet or they're on their way, these brokers see their role in this as being intentional about who they're buying from, while also trying to educate and inspire more people to come along the way. Because all of this that we saw is really community led. Alexis and I could not force this change. I think the public has done a phenomenal job conveying our issues, conveying our concerns. We don't want dogs in cages anymore. We don't want dogs living on hard wire. We want dogs getting the vet care and the testing they need. We want all of that, and we've been demanding that. And this community of breeders and some brokers are now seeing those concerns, hearing those concerns, and they're trying to set themselves apart. So that was kind of a really long way of saying that no, they're trying very hard to be intentional, just like the breeders are. Do you have anything to add about the brokering facility, Alexis?
Um, I think it was great too that they consciously capped how many dogs come into their facility, which is like once again being intentional, taking on that responsibility of like not only who am I sourcing my dogs from, but like how much can I responsibly take care of. I think too seeing the dogs in the broker place is like sometimes you're concerned, like some people talk about like it's a warehouse for dogs. But really, it was kind of like a nursery for the puppies, because we went in during like nap time too, so like they were calm, they were napping. There's some that were up and still playing and stuff, but they didn't seem stressed in the facility. Like they were just in the nursery, is what it kind of came off to be.
Yeah, and at one point I saw Devon, who again we didn't see any of his facility on our tour, but I saw him duck into one room, and so I kind of followed him in because that's the fun thing for me and Alexis. We weren't there to see anything specifically. We were kind of just there to see everything. So we just went where people went and kind of followed whoever we were following. But I popped into this room with Devon, and I heard him go, "Yep, there they are." And he leaned over the glass partition, and his puppies from his kennel that was hours away ran up to him, and they were licking his face, and he was playing with them. And it was like, oh, they have an attachment. They don't fear him. They see him as their handler, as their human, as their person. These little puppies were not born in fear like so many puppies have been over the years. And so that was just a really cool thing to see. And it was so unplanned. I know people think that Alexis and I are fools. They think we're falling for some scheme, but we just see things less two-dimensionally than before. We are trying really hard to understand that this is not an easy issue. It's insanely complex. And the faster we all kind of come to that agreement that this is complex, it is not black or white, the faster we're going to be able to see these changes and grow these changes. And then here, so we didn't visit this facility. These are photos that I borrowed. But I just, as someone, you all probably know me and you know my dog Eleanor. She was a golden retriever who suffered so greatly in an inhumane USDA licensed facility. Her puppy mill got shut down. They had more than 220 violations. Dogs lived in those cages that we showed you photos of earlier. Dogs were starving to death. USDA inspectors were walking by as dogs were starving to death. That was the hardest case I think that Bailing Out Benji has ever really been involved in. Seeing John's place and how he takes care of his golden retrievers, it just healed my heart in a way I didn't know needed healed. To know that my dog didn't have to suffer. She could have been born into a much better facility than she was, and I would have been really happy if Eleanor's parents and grandparents and puppies were born in this facility instead of the one that they had to be born in. And that's the reality we're living in right now. We're not getting rid of commercial dog breeding, right? But we can get rid of the cruelest, the most inhumane puppy mills. So dogs like Eleanor and Lana and all of these other amazing dogs who have been born out of cruelty and out of profit might not have to do that ever again. We might be creating a world and encouraging a world where, yeah, they're still breeding, but look at this. Look at these little puppies and these adult dogs playing. This isn't a puppy mill, right? And so at the Canine Care Forum, as we were getting ready to leave, Alexis and I had to make the 9-hour drive home. I went up to John and I congratulated him because he won an award for how great his kennel is. And I told him, like, congratulations, we have to go. But I'm sorry I won't see your presentation later. And he said, wait, can I show you something? I really want to show you. He pulls out his iPad and starts showing me videos of the golden retriever that is in the top right corner that he's loving on. He said that he got to save a dog. He got to save dogs, and he got to rescue them and save their lives because of how much effort and love he's put into this program. Neglected by their mother, or rejected by their mother is a better term. And they couldn't thrive in that environment at the moment. And John stepped up. He said, I'll do it. I'll see. I don't know what's going to happen, but I'd love to try. And since he already had a nursing golden retriever, he has videos of golden retriever puppies like raising these African painted dogs. And he got to be a part of something that so many of us on this call get to do all the time. We foster dogs, we rescue dogs, and because of the trust he's built and the love he's put into his kennels, he got to experience rescue. And he got to experience that too. And, he was the one who was telling me how hard it was to go to his store, to go to church sometimes and know that people in your community are judging you because you think you're better than them. And that's not his intention. That's not his heart either. He just now sees this is what people want and this is what dogs need. So I really wanted to share that story because I thought it was so powerful, to have him feel like he gave back, even though, I don't know, it's not his job to give back in that way. I just thought that was really neat. Let me look at some other questions. Lauren, one of our volunteers, shout out to all the Bailing Out Benji volunteers who attended this again. They already heard me and Alexis talk about it like right afterwards, but so many people were in the conversation, and I was just really happy to see your faces and your comments. Lauren had asked if the Amish can get grants to help build these kinds of facilities. That's not something Alexis and I know anything about, but we do know that this is very community led. So they help each other build all these facilities. And the more that we can encourage that kind of change, I think the more we're going to see these types of facilities growing. 2 other people asked, do canine care breeders sell through stores and websites? I mean, yeah, like they do. It's not something that we are going to deny. It's not something that we're angry about though, right? Because those puppy mill photos that we showed you, those breeders are selling online and those breeders are selling to pet stores. So are these guys. And a big part of the conversation that is for some reason missing is the fact that every organization, every national organization has admitted that some pet store puppies come from puppy mills. Most puppies from pet stores come from puppy mills. The majority of puppies, everything has been the majority or most. It's always been very wishy-washy. No one has ever said 100% of puppies sold in pet stores come from puppy mills. So again, this is that weird gray area that we're living in, because no, I don't call these facilities puppy mills, and I would never call these facilities puppy mills. But 2 things can also be true. Yes, they're selling online, and yes, they're selling to pet stores. Would I rather this facility sell to the public than the other ones that we're showing photos of earlier? Yes. 1,000 times yes, I would rather someone buy a puppy from one of these facilities than the ones that are currently the most accessible to the world. It is easier to find a puppy mill online or in a store than a responsible breeder. And so the public has to do their research, but that's where we come in. Our organization has to, all of us, we have to be honest and transparent about the landscape of the breeding community. So on this slide, we've talked about, without talking about the canine care program or their standards, because again, that wasn't our intention. We kind of just showed you what all of their standards are. They care about physical health, they care about behavioral health, the environment, the breeding life and retirement, and then caretaker expectations. So the very gist of it is this is kind of their core values as breeders. It's not necessarily the exact rules that they're following. And I don't think anyone really owes anyone else that kind of stuff. What I noticed after our first webinar and in the time between is that a lot of people and organizations can't give up control. And control is what's really kind of hurting the dogs in the middle, because the controlling factor is policy. People either want something to happen or they don't want something to happen. And we're forgetting all of the people and animals in the middle. And so if we can just kind of start having open and honest conversations with each other, trying to meet these breeders where they're at, trying to understand why they do what they do, I think we're going to move the needle further than we've been able to in decades. I think that this is a path forward for people to at least understand not all Amish breeders are cruel. Not all commercial kennels are terrible. And I know that's weird coming from Bailing Out Benji because we protest pet stores, and we still will. We educate about sourcing of pet stores and online websites, and we still will. We are doing huge things that other organizations aren't, but we are able to do this too. We're calling this now like our field research. We're not investigating. We're not going in with undercover cameras and trying to do anything. We are just meeting some cool people who care about animals and love animals and want to show us what they're doing. And I'm really proud of our organization for being able to live in that space because it's not easy. It is not fun to have people upset at what we're saying. So again, this wasn't about canine care, but I wanted to throw this out there too because people are terrified of this program succeeding, and I'm not quite sure why. I mean, on some level, I get it, but right now it is so small. There are like 220-ish canine care breeders that are currently certified. That is less than 6% of all USDA licensed breeders in the country. So this is such a small program that we see potential in. We think that this could really be something that just transforms the commercial dog breeding game. And I know that sounds scary to people who want to see an end to all commercial dog breeding, but I'm not going to see that in my lifetime. And I don't think Alexis is going to see that in her lifetime or even our children's children. Like the commercial dog breeding industry is like factory farming, right? It's just this huge system that exists in our country. And we have to exist within that system, right? And so laws are going to be passed, laws are going to be redacted. It's just going to continue being a political fight everywhere. But there are some people in this world that are like, look, there is a better way. And I just don't think that should be as scary as everyone thinks it is at this moment.
Okay, so that was the webinar. I'm glad that we have this platform to share it and to get that out there in front of more people. And as we always say, if you have questions, comments, let us know, and we will talk about those in future episodes. I know we got a lot of feedback after that webinar, positive and questioning. I really enjoy it. Again, coming into this with kind of fresh eyes, but having followed Bailing Out Benji for years. To me, it's just so refreshing to see. At the time, I wasn't involved with the organization at this level, as I was as a volunteer and a supporter and all that. But to see an organization that is willing to be open, even open to the experience, first of all, of just going, and open to the concept that maybe the narrative is changing. Maybe there is room for growth here, and maybe there is a little bit of, okay, we've been sending the wrong message. Just that humility to me is refreshing, and that you had the courage to stand up and say it. And we've talked about it before. Like, what are you supposed to do after that? We've said before, you could have come back and still just blasted these places, and you could have made up stories, you could have embellished stories, you could have said nothing at all. You could have pretended like it never happened, just to protect that narrative that breeders are bad. But you didn't. And I can't imagine a different way, but some people seem to want us to have done it a different way. But that integrity of, listen, I can only tell you what I saw. And to remember, we're not saying all breeders are this way. We're not saying everyone is making changes. We can only speak for the places that you've been to and the facilities that you've seen. And that's what we're trying to do.
And it truly did. We said it numerous times last episode. This started off as like a conversation of hope. We just wanted to give our volunteers hope and our supporters hope that our work was working, right? And that some places are making change, because this is such depressing work, like truly. And so we do need that little bright spot every once in a while. Like, here, your work has worked. Here, these facilities heard and they're implementing change. And we say it every time, whether or not we're okay with people dog breeding or breeding dogs, that's not what this discussion is about. This discussion is, we are now seeing progress where before everyone thought this specific community was cruel and inhumane, right? We've talked about the Amish a lot. They are the ones that get the most hate in this industry. And so for me to just say, for us as an organization to just clearly say, these breeders, yes, they are USDA licensed, but the conditions we saw weren't puppy mills. It's our sense of justice, right? We joke about that a lot. Once something makes sense to us, it's like, well, yeah, of course we're going to do it that way. And then we don't look back. And so that's kind of what this was. It was not fun to have to go against what everyone else has been saying. We didn't want to seem like traitors. We didn't want to seem like we've, just completely turned our back on dogs and on rescues and everything else. But it was really important for us to stand apart and say, we are seeing this. We are seeing some positives, and now we're going to keep working. We're going to keep doing the same things we've always done. And some of the feedback we got at the time, people were very, of course, angry because of the USDA factor, because of selling to pet stores factor. Some people who could see what we were seeing, like the idea of the fact that the kennels were doing better themselves, they saw that as a positive, but how the breeders sell was going to always be that hang up. But the reason we came forward, that sounds so weird, like we're whistleblowers or something, but the reason we decided to talk about this is because we knew other people were going to talk about it from their lens. And we knew other people were going to share what they think we're up to. And so it's like, well, no, we'll just tell you, right? We're just going to tell you what we're up to. Why would we keep it secret? When you keep things secret, when you're not transparent about them, that's when the public questions you, which has been one of our biggest arguments about puppy mills, right? And about the pet stores and all of it. Like, you have to be transparent, and that's all we're trying to do with this.
Yeah, and that's kind of wrapped into our mission as a whole. Is we were just looking this morning at some images that someone sent us for a proposed banner, and they were dark and red and black and graphic pictures and triggering language, and that's not our mission. That's not our message. I know we've been called, well, they've been deluded. They're naive. They're being manipulated. We're not. We're choosing to move forward from a place of hope and optimism. We're not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. We're not saying one incremental change fixes the entire industry, but we're also not going to not celebrate one incremental change. It's still important. So you can't be like, yes, that was a win, but still all of this horrible bad stuff. Absolutely, bad stuff still happening. We are still going to celebrate those victories because that's what we're working for every day. And why would we not celebrate when things are changing and getting better? So if that makes people call us, hopelessly optimistic or naive or whatever, then so be it. But we know what we're doing. We know where we're going. And we're always going to choose connection, optimism, and hope.
Right. And we are going to just tell you how it is. And I think people aren't used to that. We are very used to our industry using knowledge as power and holding on to things. And it wasn't even until Bailing Out Benji started publicly putting our research out there that the public had access to the people who are supplying pet stores or the breeders that have violations, because before it is that annual list or it is a small glimpse of the problem, and we are seeing the problem from one lens. And Bailing Out Benji has always been great at providing the information to the public that they need to know. And at this moment in time, we think that this is information that people need to know. There is progress, but we can't stop. We have to keep working on that. And since we've come so far, what we see as progress in the conversations we're having, we are now trying to get those breeders to make it even further and to progress even further, because now they feel empowered. Because I think I said it in a way early episode, but as a teacher, you can't like condemn a student and tell them you're bad, you're bad, you're bad, you're bad, and expect that child to grow up and have good values, right? I mean, I can't say the child can't overcome that, but that becomes their inner voice. And it's the same for this like breeding community. If we're going to call them all puppy mills no matter what, why should they do better? Why should they even, try to upgrade their standards and spend all of their profits doing so? I don't know. It's kind of, it seems like it makes sense to us when we say it.
Yeah.
But I know other people don't have that same perspective as we do.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Anything else to add?
No.
To the webinar? We've got lots more to say. There will be many more episodes about the field research coming.
And just please send in your questions if you have any. You can send them to info@bailingoutbenji.com, or if you know how to reach any of us on our own, you can do that too. We might not answer your questions in the moment, but we might do a Q&A episode after we've kind of culminated all of our research episodes, field research episodes. We're not sure, but we just want to hear feedback. So
love it. Well, thank you so much for tuning in to this kind of different episode, different format than what we usually do, but we were happy to be able to share that webinar with you. We'll be back next week with our more normal podcast episodes, where we'll be having a conversation, bringing Alexis into the dialogue, as she's been a big part of, obviously, this field research. So moving forward next week with more conversation about the field research.
Yeah. Well, thanks everyone for sitting with us again this week, and we will catch you next time. Bye.